Welcome back to Strange Resort, the podcast that lurks in the shadows of otherwise sunny vacation destinations. I am your host, George Hatfield, and tonight I am staying at a bed and breakfast above a place called Tuki's Bar and Grill. It's located in the northern part of Falmouth, Maine, but as lovely as this little town might be, there's another place in which I'm more interested. A forgotten village called Jerusalem's Lot. Now, we've explored its history before, going back to the 1700s when most of the villagers mysteriously disappeared, to the 1800s and the doomed residents of Chapelwaite Manor. Well, now it is time to reflect on the events of the 1900s. Now it is time to learn how this hapless hamlet deteriorated once and for all. Some people say that the ruins of Salem's Lot are haunted, and some people say it's worse than that. For example, Shelley Dunn, the owner of this bed and breakfast, has dubbed this area Vampire Village, and her little hotel caters to those who seek protection from the undead. So tonight, I will be sleeping in a room that is hopefully vampire-proof. The bar is a vintage small-town tavern. The menu doesn't have much variety beyond buffalo wings and stuffed potato skins, with the exception of a delectable and reasonably priced lobster roll. It's Friday night. A few of the regulars are shooting pool and arguing about the Red Sox, but for the most part, it's not very busy. Which is why the owners, Mr. and Mrs. Dunn, decided to renovate the upstairs into an unusual inn.
Over the years, we had so many people ask for a safe place.
Safe from what?
Safe from, vampires. So I thought, why not a bed and breakfast that feels like a sanctuary from them?
I should point out that the doors to Tuki's bar have a strange message written in red.
We put it in writing on every door of this building.
Humans welcome, vampires are not invited, ever.
If vampires aren't invited, they don't come in. Simple as that. But we've got many other precautions.
This is Mrs. Dunn. She's leading me to the upstairs of this early 20th century building. It is cramped but quaint, rustic. Yet every wooden surface is well oiled and smells of garlic.
Yes, we polish the wood with garlic oil. My own blend. It drives them batty.
All along the walls, there are dozens of mirrors and hundreds of crucifixes. In the hallway, there is a fire extinguisher, but there's also a wooden stake mounted on the wall in case of emergency. She shows me into room 777. Now, there are only 5 rooms, by the way, and they are all marked 777 because Mrs. Dunn believes it's a holy number. Inside the room, there are more crosses on the walls, framed paintings of saints and popes gone by, and stacks of Bibles. It's cozy and a bit claustrophobic, to say the least. But there is a charming bathroom, complete with an old-fashioned washtub. She turns on the faucet.
Feel that? That's holy water.
That's right. Every week, the priest from Holy Martyrs Church blesses the pipes so that every bathtub, every sink has fresh access to holy water. She puts a silver chain with a cross around my neck.
Sleep with this. and you'll be safe and sound.
Back in the downstairs tavern, I'm curious about how many guests stay here. The husband, Oliver Dunn, tells me that most folks are drawn to the novelty of it all, but a surprising number of people come here specifically for refuge. People from around these parts sometimes see something that they can't explain, so they stay with us for a night or two. And the thing that they can't explain is a vampire? Is that what they say? In a lot of cases, there's just this dark sort of trouble they can't quite name. A dark sort of trouble. Can you give me an example? And Mr. Dunn could. The story he tells me happened a few years before he and his wife bought the place, back when Tuki's bar was owned by Herb Tucklander. This was January 10th, during the infamous blizzard of 1979. Several feet of snow dropped that night. The only two people in the bar were Tucklander and a loyal barfly named Booth. Just as Tuki's was about to close shop, a man burst through the door. He was exhausted and terrified. His name was Gerald Lumley, and his car had gotten stuck in a snowdrift 6 miles south. He and his family had been traveling from New Jersey. Unfamiliar with the area and not realizing the town of Jerusalem's Lot was abandoned and therefore had no snowplows, Lumley had taken a right turn on Jointer Avenue, and that's where his car became stuck. He left his family with the car running and the heater on and went running through the blizzard. Tuki's bar was the first sign of civilization he could find. According to this second or third hand story, Herbert Tucklander refused to help at first, and it wasn't simply because of the blizzard. He believed, as many folks do in this part of Maine, that vampires lurked in the ruins of Salem's Lot. The idea of journeying into a blood-sucking pit of the undead terrified him, and he wouldn't have been the only one. This common superstition about the town of Jerusalem's Lot had developed over the centuries. The infamous Boone family developed a religious cult in the 1700s, followed by the mysterious mass exodus of the town's population. Then, in the early 20th century, the town seemingly returned to a normal way of American life. But in 1928, Hubert Marston and his wife Bertie decided to retire in Jerusalem's Lot, and they built a home overlooking the quiet New England hamlet. Marston was supposedly the president of a truck company, but that was most likely the front for a bootlegging operation. For over a decade, Mr. and Mrs. Marston lived in their monolithic mansion, keeping to themselves, hermit-like. Then, in the summer of 1939, a postal worker named Larry McLeod detected a putrid smell coming from the home. He knocked on the front door. No answer. He checked the side windows, and then he checked the unlocked kitchen door in the back of the house and discovered the fly-ridden remains of Bertie Marston, shotgun blast to the head. And it was very fortunate that the postman hadn't entered through the front door, because Hubert Marston had set a deadly trap, attaching a string from the doorknob to the trigger of his shotgun. The house was a hoarder's labyrinth of newspaper stacks, old books, and bizarre, antiquated junk, not to mention more booby traps. The town's constable, Norris Varney, avoided these dangers as he searched the house for signs of Hubert. He found him, dangling from a rope in the upstairs bedroom. He had murdered his wife and hanged himself. But that was probably not the first time Hubert had taken a life. Although Marston was never convicted, police believe he made his way up the ranks of organized crime, starting out as a hitman. He had been taken in for questioning several times. One of the police investigations in which Marston was a person of interest was a case involving the murder of an 11-year-old boy, and it had nothing to do with bootlegging. This unwanted notoriety led to his departure from the mob. Then, during the 10.5 years of Hubert's residency in Jerusalem's lot, an occasional child would go missing. Once about every 2 or 3 years. No one knows if those children were murdered, or if they simply ran away or were lost. But by 1939, after the Marsten House murder-suicide, most folks were convinced that in addition to all of his other heinous crimes, Hubert Marston was a child killer. As disturbing as all of this is, you might be thinking, so what? How do vampires come into play? Because the house was shuttered up for many years after the Marston murders, the townsfolk began whispering about ghosts and other things that go bump in the night. Rumors began to transform the late Hubert Marston from a dead psychopath into a lingering and malevolent spirit, one that still lurked in the shadows, at least according to the schoolyard stories. Then, in the 1970s, things got worse. The Marsten House was purchased by a pair of European antique dealers, and during the week of the grand opening of their shop in town, another child went missing. His name was Ralphie Glick. He and his brother were walking through the woods when, according to the older brother, an abduction occurred. Rumors swirled again, and now the European strangers who had taken up residency at the Marsten House became the new scapegoat. But here's the thing. Some people in town went beyond accusations of kidnapping. They believed that Richard Straker and Kurt Barlow were vampires, that one or both of them had bitten Ralphie Glick, and several people claimed that they had seen the boy flying outside their window, tapping on the glass to get in. This situation was worsened by a sudden and mysterious illness that swept through the town in a matter of days. The symptoms included extreme fatigue, loss of appetite, and an aversion to light. Danny Glick, the older brother, just days after little Ralphie's disappearance, died from this illness, which some journalists now believe was a cholera outbreak due to the town's outdated water treatment system. But logical reasons for these tragedies were cast to the wayside. The town chose fear and hysteria instead. In the days that followed, several others disappeared. More people became sick, and many people moved away very quickly. The few remaining citizens who looked to their local priest, Father Callahan, discovered that even he had fled in fear, leaving town on a Greyhound bus. So why the hysteria? Was it a genuine belief in the undead? Given the homophobic and xenophobic nature of the 1970s, my guess is that the community wasn't really afraid of vampires, but they believed that Straker and Barlow were two gay men sent from Europe to corrupt their youth. But that bigotry manifested into supernatural tales of vampire bites and reanimated corpses. Their antique business, Barlow and Straker's Fine Furnishings, failed before it even had a chance to begin, and less than a year later, the town had once again become abandoned. The storefronts empty, the homes deserted. Then the ghost town was ripe for vandals and transients, and finally, arsonists. On an October night in the mid-1970s, someone set fire to the Marsten House, which set the rest of the town ablaze. There was no fire department to put it out. No one was in town. Now, in 2023, only the charred cadaver of the town remains. but the tales of vampires and evil spirits are still very much alive. Which brings us back to Herbert Tucklander, the original owner of Tuki's bar. Tucklander must have believed in the vampires like so many others in this part of the state, because at first he did not want to enter the shadows of Salem's Lot in order to help out a stranger. But Gerald Lumley begged until Tucklander and Booth mustered up the courage, and all three men headed into the snowstorm. They drove into the ruins of Jerusalem's Lot, and they found Gerald's vehicle still running, headlights still shining into the darkness. For whatever reason, perhaps from having one too many whiskey shots from Tuki's bar, Booth took a Polaroid camera to document this event. At least according to Mr. Dunn he did. He keeps these photos on a corkboard behind the bar. So did they ever find the family?
It depends on who you ask.
According to this story, Gerald Lumley called out for his family, losing his mind with worry and fear. And then he spotted his wife, Janie Lumley, stepping from the woods, her eyes red and silvery, no doubt reflecting the lights of the headlamps. But to Tucklander and Booth, those eyes must have looked unworldly. Gerald Manley ran to his wife, except, according to Tucklander and Booth, she wasn't his wife anymore. She was a vampire, beautiful, hypnotic, evil, and very hungry. The two older men ran from the scene, just as Janie Lumley bit down into her husband's neck. I'm looking at a photo of the woods at night. There's lots of snow, and there's no vampire. Sorry, but I just don't see anything.
Of course not. You can't take a photo of a vampire.
So I'm sorry, you said this was proof?
Look a little closer. You see that?
He gives me a magnifying lens, and I see something very small, a circle.
Oh, yep, that's Mrs. Lumley's wedding ring, just floating there.
So you think this is a wedding ring floating on the invisible finger of a vampire? All right, let's accept that as one possibility. What about the little girl? Did they find her?
Right by the car door. According to Tuki, she was wearing a yellow dress, holding a teddy bear.
The next photo shows what you've probably already guessed, a teddy bear hovering next to a car. A few other customers have come in, and so as Mr. Dunn turns his attention to them, I turn my attention to my computer. I want to confirm this old story from over 40 years ago, and I quickly find out that at least a few things ring true. Gerald Lumley, his wife Janie, and their daughter Francie, only 7 years old, went missing that night. A full-scale search was conducted in the light of day. No bodies were ever discovered. But it wasn't long before all three were presumed dead, because it was argued that no human could survive that blizzard. Emphasis on the word human. So, were they swept away in the icy river nearby? Did they stage their own death and begin a new life across the Canadian border? Or are the town's rumors somehow true? Are there vampires in Salem's Lot? And did the living dead claim the Lumley family as one of their own? Mysteries have shrouded this region for centuries, so I'm not expecting to find any answers soon. But I am expecting to get a good night's sleep. It's 1:15 a.m. My room stinks of garlic, and all these crucifixes are a bit stark, to say the least. And there are complimentary bottles of water, not just water, but bottled holy water. So when I leave here tomorrow, I'm going to take one for the road. Something or someone is tapping on the window. I'm hoping it's just a tree, even though there aren't any trees next to this building. Yeah, someone is tapping on my window. And I am on the second floor.